There is a moment, quiet, often uncomfortable, when you begin to feel the weight of being alone. It may feel like something is missing, like a disconnection from the world around you. But what if I told you that in that very moment, something profound is happening within you? Something intelligent, something deeply transformative. Your brain is not shutting down in loneliness, it is reorganizing itself. You see, the human brain is designed to adapt. It is not fixed, not rigid, not limited by your past experiences. It is constantly changing, constantly reshaping itself based on what you feel, what you focus on, and what you repeatedly experience. This ability is known as neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable power to rewire itself. And loneliness, as uncomfortable as it may seem, can act as a powerful trigger for this rewiring. When the noise of the external world begins to fade, when the distractions and constant interactions are reduced, your brain is no longer occupied with reacting, it begins to turn inward. At first, this can feel unsettling. Thoughts you have avoided may surface. Emotions you've suppressed may rise. But this is not a sign that something is wrong. This is a sign that something is awakening. In your usual routine, your brain forms habits, patterns of thinking, reacting, and behaving that become automatic over time. These patterns are reinforced through repetition, especially in social environments where validation, comparison, and external feedback shape your identity. But when you step into solitude, even if it feels forced upon you, those patterns are interrupted. And in that interruption, there is space. Space for new connections to form within your brain. Space for you to question what you've always believed. Space for you to see yourself without the influence of others. This is where transformation begins, not in comfort, but in the unfamiliar silence where your mind starts to reorganize itself. Loneliness slows you down. And in that slowing down, your brain shifts its activity. Instead of constantly reacting to external stimuli, it begins to engage in deeper processing. It reflects, it integrates, it makes sense of your experiences in a way that is simply not possible when you are always distracted. This is why moments of solitude have historically been linked to insight, creativity, and profound personal breakthroughs. Because when the brain is given the opportunity to rest from constant input, it doesn't become idle, it becomes active in a different, more meaningful way. You may notice that during these moments, you start thinking differently. You begin to observe your own thoughts rather than being consumed by them. You start to recognize patterns, fears, doubts, beliefs that have been running quietly in the background of your life. And as you become aware of them, something incredible happens. You gain the power to change them. This is the essence of neuroplasticity. The brain strengthens what you repeatedly focus on. So, if your mind has been conditioned by fear, insecurity, or dependency on others, solitude gives you the chance to interrupt that conditioning. It allows you to consciously choose new thoughts, new perspectives, new ways of being. At first, this process may feel uncomfortable. The mind resists change because it is wired to seek familiarity. But if you stay present, if you allow yourself to move through the discomfort without escaping it, your brain begins to adapt. It starts forming new neural pathways, pathways rooted in awareness rather than unconscious reaction. And slowly, almost subtly, you begin to feel different. You feel less dependent on external validation, less reactive to the opinions of others, more grounded within yourself. This is not because the world has changed, but because your brain has begun to reorganize how it perceives and responds to the world. What once felt like emptiness starts to feel like clarity. What once felt like isolation begins to feel like space, space to grow, to understand, to become. And this is the shift that changes everything. Because when your brain rewires itself in this way, you are no longer living on autopilot. You are no longer driven by unconscious patterns shaped by past experiences or external influences. You become intentional, aware, present. Loneliness then is not something to fear. It is not a void to be filled, but a process to be understood. It is your brain's way of creating the conditions necessary for transformation. It is the pause between who you were and who you are becoming. If you can embrace this moment, not resist it, not escape it, but truly be with it, you allow your mind to do what it was designed to do, evolve. And in that evolution, you don't lose yourself. You finally begin to find who you truly are as the external noise begins to fade and the constant pull of interaction loosens its grip on your attention. Something subtle yet profound starts to unfold within you. What once felt like silence now becomes a space alive, aware, and deeply intelligent. In that space, your awareness begins to turn in that space, your awareness begins to turn inward, not as an escape from the world, but as a return to something essential within yourself. Most of your life, your attention has been directed outward. You've been taught to respond, to achieve, to compare, to seek, to compare, to seek meaning through people, through outcomes, through experiences. And in doing so, your mind becomes conditioned to operate on the surface, reacting, processing, moving from one stimulus to another without ever truly pausing. But when you find yourself alone, removed from that constant engagement, your mind begins to shift into a different mode of functioning. There is a network within your brain that becomes active in these moments of quiet reflection. It is the part of you that engages when you are not focused on the outside world, when you are not solving problems or responding to demands. Instead, it turns your attention inward. It begins to observe, to reflect, to make sense of your inner world. And this is where self awareness is born. At first, this can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. Without distractions, you are faced with your own thoughts in their raw, unfiltered form. You may notice patterns you have never paid attention to before, recurring doubts, silent fears, unspoken desires. You may begin to question things you once accepted without thought. And in that questioning, something begins to awaken. Self awareness is not simply thinking about yourself. It is the ability to observe your thoughts without becoming them. It is the quiet recognition that there is a deeper part of you, an observer that exists beyond the constant stream of mental activity. And when you begin to connect with that part of yourself, your relationship with your mind begins to change. Instead of being pulled in every direction by your thoughts, you start to witness them. You begin to see that not every thought is true, not every emotion defines you. There is a space between you and what you experience, and in that space lies clarity. This clarity allows you to see yourself more honestly, not through the lens of how others perceive you, not through the roles you've been playing, but as you truly are. You begin to understand why you react, the way you do, why certain situations trigger you, why you hold on to certain beliefs. And this understanding is not judgment, it is awareness. And awareness in itself is transformative because the moment you become aware of a pattern, it begins to lose its unconscious power over you. You are no longer repeating behavior simply because they are familiar. You now have a choice. You can respond differently. You can think differently, thus, you can begin to align your actions with a deeper sense of truth rather than automatic conditioning. This is why solitude, when embraced consciously, becomes a gateway to insight. It gives your mind the opportunity to step back from the noise and see the bigger picture. It allows you to reconnect with questions that truly matter. Who am I beyond my roles? What do I truly value? What kind of life am I creating? These are not questions that can be answered in distraction. They require stillness, they require presence, they require the courage to sit with yourself without needing to escape. And as you stay with that stillness, something begins to shift. What once felt like emptiness starts to feel like depth. What once felt like loneliness begins to feel like connection. A connection not to something outside of you, but to your own inner intelligence. You start to trust yourself more, not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to listen. You begin to notice subtle intuitions, quiet insights that arise without force. These are not loud or demanding, but they carry a sense of truth that feels undeniable. This is the mind becoming aligned with awareness rather than distraction. In this state, your sense of identity begins to evolve. You are no longer defined solely by your past experiences or external validation. You begin to see yourself as something more fluid, more expansive. You recognize that who you are is not fixed. It is something that can grow, shift, and deepen with awareness. And this realization brings a sense of freedom because when you are aware, you are no longer confined to old patterns. You are no longer reacting blindly. You are present. You are conscious. You are engaged with your life in a way that is intentional rather than automatic. This is the gift hidden within silence. It is not empty, it is full of insight, full of intelligence, full of the potential to transform how you see yourself and the world around you. So the next time you find yourself alone, instead of reaching for distraction, pause. Allow yourself to be present with your own awareness. Observe without judgment. Listen without resistance. Because in that quiet space, you are not losing connection. You are discovering it at its deepest level. And in that discovery, you begin to see yourself more clearly than ever before. There is a certain kind of discomfort that arises when you begin to sit with yourself without distraction. It doesn't announce itself loudly at first, but it lingers beneath the surface. A subtle ache, a sense of restlessness, sometimes even a quiet heaviness in your chest. You may interpret this as something negative, something to avoid or escape. But what you are feeling is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a signal that something within you is asking to be seen. Emotional pain has a way of drawing your attention inward. It interrupts your prevailing patterns, slows you down, and forces you to confront what has long been hidden beneath activity and noise. Most of the time, we are conditioned to avoid this discomfort. We distract ourselves. We seek relief in external things. We try to move past it as quickly as possible. But in doing so, we miss the deeper intelligence behind it. Your brain does not experience emotional pain randomly. The same neural systems that process physical pain are involved when you feel rejection, loss, or loneliness. This is not accidental, it is purposeful. Pain, in any form, is designed to capture your awareness. It is the brain's way of saying, pay attention, something here matters. And when you begin to pay attention, not resist, not suppress, but truly observe, something begins to change. The pain that once felt overwhelming starts to reveal its structure. You begin to notice that it is not constant. It moves, it shifts, it rises and falls. It is made up of sensations, thoughts, and interpretations that your mind has been holding on to. In this awareness, a new possibility emerges. Instead of being consumed by the pain, you start to relate to it differently. You become curious. You begin to ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? What belief is beneath this emotion? What part of me is asking for attention? This shift from resistance to observation is where growth begins. Because when you resist pain, you reinforce it. Your brain learns that this is something threatening, something to avoid, and it strengthens the patterns associated with fear and avoidance. But when you face it with awareness, without judgment, your brain begins to process it differently. The intensity gradually decreases, and new neural pathways begin to form, pathways associated with understanding, resilience, and emotional regulation. This is not about forcing yourself to feel better. It is about allowing yourself to feel fully without becoming lost in the experience. It is about recognizing that pain is not your enemy, it is a messenger. Often, emotional pain is connected to unprocessed experiences from the past, moments where you felt unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. These experiences don't simply disappear, they are stored within your nervous system, waiting for the right conditions to be acknowledged and integrated. Loneliness, in a strange way, creates those conditions. It removes the distractions that keep these emotions buried, bringing them gently to the surface. And while this can feel uncomfortable, it is also deeply healing because what is brought into awareness can be transformed. As you sit with these emotions without trying to escape them, your brain begins to update its understanding. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt like a threat becomes something you can hold with compassion. You begin to realize that you are not as fragile as you once believed. You are capable of experiencing discomfort without breaking. This realization builds a quiet strength within you, not the kind that resists or suppresses, but the kind that allows and understands. You become less reactive, less controlled by emotional waves because you have learned how to stay present within them. And in this presence, something remarkable happens. The energy that was once tied up in resisting pain becomes available for growth. Your mind becomes clearer, your perception becomes sharper. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin to respond to life with intention rather than reaction. This is how pain transforms into growth, not by disappearing, but by being integrated. You start to understand that discomfort is not something to fear, it is part of the process of becoming more aware, more resilient, more aligned with who you truly are. Each moment of emotional intensity carries within it the potential for insight, for clarity, for transformation. And the more you allow yourself to move through these experiences consciously, the more your brain adapts. It learns that you are safe even in discomfort. It learns that emotions are temporary, that they do not define you, that they can be experienced without losing yourself. This is the foundation of emotional freedom. Because when you are no longer afraid of your own feelings, you are no longer controlled by them, you are able to move through life with a sense of openness, knowing that whatever arises within you can be met with awareness and understanding. So when emotional pain surfaces, do not rush to silence it, do not label it as something negative that must be removed. Instead, see it as an invitation, a call to go deeper, to listen more closely, to understand yourself more fully. Because within that discomfort lies the doorway to your growth. And the moment you stop running from it is the moment you begin to evolve. There is a rhythm that modern life quietly imposes on the mind, a constant stream of stimulation that keeps your attention moving, shifting, never quite settling. Notifications, conversations, information, entertainment, each one pulling you outward. Yeah. So, one giving your brain a brief surge of activity, a momentary sense of engagement. Over time, this becomes more than a habit, it becomes a dependency. Your brain begins to crave this stimulation. It becomes accustomed to frequent bursts of novelty, of distraction, of input, and with each new stimulus, there is a subtle release of pleasure, reinforcing the cycle. You reach for your phone without thinking. You fill silence with noise. You avoid stillness, not because it is uncomfortable in itself, but because your mind has been trained to expect constant engagement. And then loneliness enters, and with it, an unexpected shift. The external sources of stimulation begin to decrease. The usual distractions are no longer as immediate, as fulfilling, or as available, and suddenly you are left with something unfamiliar: space. Not just physical space, but mental space. At first, this can feel unsettling. Your mind searches for something to hold on to, something to occupy its attention. It may feel restless, even agitated. But what you're experiencing is not emptiness, it is withdrawal. Your brain, having grown accustomed to constant stimulation, is adjusting to its absence. It is like stepping away from a noise you didn't realize was always there. In the beginning, the silence feels loud. The absence of distraction feels uncomfortable. But if you stay with it, if you resist the urge to immediately fill that space, something remarkable begins to happen. Your mind starts to slow down. The constant craving for stimulation begins to weaken. The urge to reach for distraction loses its intensity. And in that gradual quieting, your brain begins to reset itself. This is what can be understood as a kind of mental detox, not forced, not imposed, but naturally unfolding as your environment changes. In this state, your attention becomes clearer. Instead of being scattered across multiple inputs, it begins to gather, to focus. You start to notice things you once overlooked. Thoughts become more coherent. Ideas begin to form with greater depth. There is a sense of clarity that emerges not because you are adding more information, but because you are finally allowing your mind to process what is already there. This is the intelligence of stillness. When your brain is no longer overwhelmed by constant input, it shifts into a more integrated mode of functioning. It begins to connect ideas, to reflect, to create meaning. This is where insight arises, not from effort, but from presence. You may begin to notice that your thinking changes. It becomes less reactive, less impulsive. You are no longer jumping from one thought to another. without awareness. Instead, there is a sense of continuity, a flow. You are able to stay with a thought, to explore it, to understand it more deeply. And with this comes a greater sense of control, not control in the sense of force, but in the sense of awareness. You are no longer being pulled unconsciously by every impulse or distraction. You are choosing where your attention goes. This is a profound shift because attention is one of the most valuable resources you have. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. And when your attention is constantly fragmented, your energy becomes scattered. But when your attention is focused, your energy becomes aligned. Loneliness, in this way, gives you the opportunity to reclaim your attention. It removes the layers of distraction that once dictated your focus, allowing you to see how your mind has been operating. And as you become aware of these patterns, you gain the ability to change them. You may find yourself becoming more present in simple moments, more aware of your surroundings, your thoughts, your emotions. There is a richness in experience that begins to unfold, not because something new has been added, but because you are finally paying attention. This presence brings a sense of calm, not a forced calm, but a natural one that arises when the mind is no longer overstimulated. You begin to feel less urgency, less need to constantly do something. There is a comfort in simply being. And in that state, your mind becomes more creative. Without the constant noise of distraction, new ideas have space to emerge. You may notice insights appearing unexpectedly, solutions to problems you weren't actively trying to solve. This is not accidental. It is the result of a mind that is no longer overwhelmed, but open. This openness is where true clarity lives. You begin to see a life more objectively. You are able to reflect on your choices, your direction, your priorities without being clouded by constant input. There is a sense of perspective that arises, a deeper understanding of what truly matters. And with that understanding, your actions begin to change. You are no longer acting out of habit or impulse. You are acting metoch awareness. Your decisions become more intentional, more aligned with your deeper sense of self. And this alignment creates sense of coherence in your life, a feeling that your thoughts, actions, and values are moving in the same direction. This is not something that can be achieved through constant stimulation. It requires space. It requires stillness. It requires telecid. It requires the willingness to step away from distraction and allow your mind to reset. It may not feel comfortable at first, but it is deeply purposeful. It is the process through which your mind releases its dependency on constant input and reconnects with its natural state of clarity. And as this process unfolds, you begin to realize that what you once feared as emptiness is actually a doorway into a min, D, that is clear, focused, and truly awake. And the moment you stop escaping the silence is the moment your mind begins to return to itself. There comes a point in this journey where something subtle yet profound begins to shift within you. It is not loud, not dramatic, not something that demands attention. In fact, it is so quiet that you might almost miss it if you are not fully present. But once you recognize it, everything begins to feel different. What once felt like loneliness now starts to dissolve into a deeper sense of connection. Not connection in the way you once understood it, through people, conversations, or shared experiences, but something far more fundamental. It is a connection to your own awareness, to the very essence of what it means to be. Up until now, Much of your identity may have been shaped by external influence. The roles you play, the expectations you carry, the stories you've been told about who you are, these layers form a kind of surface identity. And while they serve a purpose, they are not the entirety of you. Beneath them, there is something more constant, more stable, more real. When you begin to spend time in stillness, when you allow the noise to settle and the distractions to fade, you start to sense this deeper layer of yourself that does not speak in words. It does not demand validation. It simply is. At first, this experience can feel unfamiliar. You are so used to defining yourself through thoughts, your likes, your dislikes, your past, your plans, that the absence of those definitions can feel like a void. But if you remain present, if you resist the urge to fill that space with mental noise, you begin to realize that it is not empty at all. It is full of awareness. This awareness is not something you create, it is something you recognize. It has always been there, quietly observing, witnessing every thought, every emotion, every experience you've ever had. But because your attention has been so focused on the content of your mind, you may have overlooked the presence that is aware of it all. And as you begin to shift your attention from what you are experiencing to the awareness that is experiencing it, something changes. You start to feel a sense of spaciousness within yourself. Thoughts come and go, but they no longer define you. Emotions rise and fall, but they no longer control you. There is a part of you that remains steady, unchanged, regardless of what is happening on the surface. This is the beginning of awakening. It is not about becoming something new. It is about recognizing what has always been true. It is about seeing beyond the layers of conditioning and identity and reconnecting with the deeper essence of who you are. In this state, loneliness loses its meaning because loneliness implies a lack, a sense that something is missing, that you are separate, disconnected. But when you are connected to your own awareness, there is no sense of lack. There is a completeness, a wholeness that does not depend on anything outside of you. You begin to feel at ease, not because everything in your life is perfect, but because you are no longer searching for something to complete you. You realize that the sense of incompleteness you once felt was not due to the absence of others, but the absence of connection with yourself. And now that connection is being restored. This does not mean you no longer value relationships or external experiences. On the contrary, it allows you to engage with them more fully, more authentically, because you are no longer approaching them from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. You are able to give without losing yourself, to connect without becoming dependent, to experience without attaching your identity to the outcome. There is freedom in this, a freedom that comes from knowing that who you are is not limited to your thoughts, your emotions, or your circumstances. You are the awareness in which all of these arise. And as this realization deepens, your perspective on life begins to shift. You start to see that much of the struggle you once experienced came from identifying too strongly with the surface level of your mind. The constant thinking, the endless analysis, the need to control or understand everything, these were attempts to find stability in something that is inherently unstable. But now you are anchored in something deeper, a quiet presence that does not need to prove itself, a stillness that exists beneath all movement, a sense of being that is complete in itself. This is where peace begins to emerge. not as something you chase, but as something you uncover. It is not dependent on circumstances. It is not something that can be taken away. It is simply the natural state that reveals itself when you are no longer lost in the noise of your own mind. And in this state, you begin to live differently. You move through the world with greater awareness, greater compassion, greater clarity. You are not driven by the same fears, the same insecurities, the same need for validation. You are guided by a deeper intelligence, one that is shant, steady, and deeply connected to the present moment. This is the true transformation that loneliness can bring, not isolation, but integration, not emptiness, but fullness, not disconnection, but a deeper connection than you have ever known. And when you see this clearly, when you truly experience it for yourself, you realize that what you once feared was actually guiding you here all along. You were never alone. You were simply being led back to yourself.